facilitated it from January through May on the second Thursday of every month. So here's the thing, there's only 6 spots because of the type of a program that it is. So if you are interested in joining, please enroll as soon as possible between November 16th and December 11th. Now, one of the things to remember, you need to be a chapter member, and please be committed to all of the sessions because you're going to, have a really nice relationship with each one of your coaches. And if Annie, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, thanks for, or Mikkel, sorry about that. Thanks for asking that question. There won't be any CCEUs for this program. We heard from our members who stated they wanted to have an opportunity to practice pure coaching skills. So that is what this program is for, is to just practice those skills. The meeting time, thank you, Georgia, is going to be from 4 to 5:30 Mountain Time on Thursdays. That was like the second Thursday of the month. Our kickoff meeting is the first meeting in January. So you'll get even more questions answered then. But in the meantime, don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have questions. I'll be happy to do my best to answer them. And if I can't, I will connect you with Jennifer.
Great. Thank you, Annie.
Yeah.
All right. So we're very excited about this new program. Okay, volunteer and leadership opportunities. So as you heard, we have 2 new programs in process now with Kent, the book club, and Jennifer with the Coach to Coach. But we would love to have anybody interested in joining now for our May coaching week. And Stephanie's going to be chairing that. She did it last year, so she's experienced, and she's looking to start her group up in January. So it's a nice, it's not going to be a last minute sort of thing. You'll really get to enjoy working on a committee and putting together something for the public. And I think you'll really have a good time, especially if you've never worked with Stephanie before. You're really going to have fun. And she has her email there to take so that you could email her and find out more a little bit about what she's thinking. If you would love to facilitate a book review, we are looking for somebody to start one in March because that's when we'll be finishing the other one. So if you're interested in a book, you don't have to have read the book. You don't have to know anything about it. The whole point is that a group of you that are interested in looking at a book together, reading it and discussing it. So that's kind of fun. So we're looking for somebody to do that next after Kent. If you have other creative ideas for networking, a conversation, please let us know. We want to expand our programs for coaches. Let's see. Oh, we are also looking for somebody to join, some of you to enjoy our committees. If you want to be part of the program committee with Stacy or communications, membership, we really want to expand our committee members so that we can all have fun, not just us board members and chair and committee chairs. So please let us know. Our partnership, don't forget Veterans Day was Wednesday. Don't forget our veterans. We have partnered with Stand Beside Them. So if you're looking to help veterans and their families over the next year, please take a look at our website for more information on that. Social media, join our LinkedIn chapter. We're still working on getting more interaction on our social media so that you can advertise your workshops and everything. And let's see, as you know, with our programs and for our May coaching week, you get to earn CCEUs. So attend the event from the very beginning to the end and complete the program survey after each event. Okay, our upcoming events. Book club, as I said, the second meeting, December 4th from 12 to 1. We have a new wine and cheese connection, December 3rd at 4 to 5:30 Mountain Time. We're really excited about that. Is continuing to move forward. And then, as I mentioned, the Coach to Coach. Our next program is with Lisa Dehart, and she's going to speak to story jacking, rewrite the narrative, and additionally, she's going to add to that to make it more in-depth and integrative with you, the art and science of coaching. So that should really be wonderful with 2.5 core credits. Yay. Very excited. Global news. We have new team coaching competencies, and they will be available to everybody November 23rd, and we will post them on our website for you. That's really wonderful. Okay, you've already maybe recording, Stacy. And so, and what all you've been waiting for is my honor to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Irena O'Brien, a cognitive neuroscientist and founder of the Neuroscience School. She provides specialized evidence-based training and multiple peer-reviewed information programs to coaches and professionals within the fields of health and wellness. When I visited her website, and after reading more about her programs, I'm impressed about how she takes a difficult to understand topic and transforms it into practical nuggets of information that we can use in all our daily lives. On a personal note, and from a professional perspective, I'm especially interested in how I can help myself, my clients, and my students to increase motivation in the year of COVID-19 fatigue. So it is my great honor to introduce Dr. Irena O'Brien. Thank you for being with us.
Oh, thank you, Vicki. Let me share my screen. Yeah. How long do I have?
We like to be finished at 12:55.
Okay, that includes Q&A at the end.
Correct, right.
Okay, so I'll watch my time then. Okay, thanks. So welcome to this webinar on the 10 neuroscience strategies that I use personally to make my brain work for me. And they can work for you too, and for your clients. And neuroscience has been a game changer in my life. And I use what I learned from neuroscience to better my own life and my family's life. And I'd like that for you too, and for your families and your clients. And if you've noticed that I read my notes, it's because I suffer from anxiety. And this is one of the ways I manage it. And it allows me to continue to do the work that I do. So I hope I can count on your understanding, because I have a lot of good information to share. And so this is how I plan to proceed. I'll present a neuroscience strategy, and after each one, I'll ask a reflection question. And I invite you to post your answer in the chat, and Stacy will moderate the chat, and I'll take live questions at the end. Does that sound okay? Yeah? So let's begin. How come I can't? Oh, there it is. So the obsession with changing mindset as the holy grail of motivation is a big lie. The single best way to increase motivation is to make progress in meaningful work, no matter how small. And this is based on the research of Teresa Amabile and Stephen Kramer from Harvard Business School, who followed 238 employees for between 9 and 38 weeks. And this motivation leads to greater productivity and creativity. Yeah, and making progress, so being productive and creative, leads to more motivation, which leads to even more progress. And they call this the progress loop, where progress and motivation fuel each other in an upward spiral. And to be meaningful, your work doesn't have to have profound importance to society. What matters is whether you perceive your work as contributing value to something or someone else, or someone who matters, even your team, yourself, or your family. So a story I read in Harvard Business Review illustrates this very well. So John F. Kennedy ran into a janitor at NASA in 1962. And when the president asked him what he was doing, the man said, "I'm helping put a man on the moon." So here's the man who found meaning in what we would consider to be an unfulfilling and even meaningless job. And so how does this work? When we succeed on a task, we get a burst of dopamine. And this dopamine spike increases the probability of success on the next task. We can create a string of successes by breaking down big goals into a series of small, manageable tasks. The tasks should be small enough for you to succeed at them. If you start your day with a small, manageable task that you know you can succeed at, it can set you up for a productive day. So my anxiety often starts first thing in the morning. And when it does, I remind myself that I only need to start on something small and simple that's not scary, but that's still important and that I can achieve. And so looking at a blank page to write an article is scary. So the task I often choose is to start with how the research study was carried out. I can copy and paste that from the research study itself into my article, and then I can edit it later and make it easier to understand. And this sets me up for a productive day, and it works every time. And so when I tried to start my day with the most important thing first, which is what many coaches advise, my anxiety level would stay high all day and I'd accomplish very little. And this works even if you don't suffer from anxiety. I've been teaching this in my habits course, and it's amazing how well it works for everyone I've taught this to. The key is that you need to experience success on the first task of the day. And by task here, I mean a work-related task. And it's also another way to overcome procrastination too. So procrastination is always short-term mood repair, meaning that we avoid a task to relieve the immediate anxiety or fear or even boredom that we may have about the task. But you can break the task down into something small and simple that you know you can succeed at. It takes away the fear factor from the task and can start that upward spiral. So I have a question for you now, and I invite you to share it in the chat. So what small but important work-related task could you start your day with? And I stress work-related because that doesn't include things like making your bed, eating a good breakfast, or doing your morning meditation, right? So I invite you to share in the chat.
Okay, Nancy says, check my phone, mails, and text. Kate says, look at my emails from the previous day.
Okay. I'm going to challenge that. I'm going to challenge that because I know it's tempting to do that, but I think that it could be counterproductive because it's not really, it's kind of like scanning, right? It's not really getting down to heavy work. And so I really mean like getting down to something really productive. So checking email is really not that productive. Do you get that? I can see that it could be important, but it's not really very productive to get you into a work, like a work productive mindset.
Okay, and Georgia says, create a piece of content. Blaine says, plan my work for the day and establish blocks of shallow and deep work.
Exactly. Those are better things than checking email.
Patricia says, respond to one email.
Perhaps. Yeah. So why don't we move on then to attention. So your brain is constantly bombarded by external and internal stimulation, most of which we're not aware of. So the brain must decide what bits of information it's going to pay attention to. And most of what the brain will pay attention to is unconscious, such as information from the gut or the heart via our autonomic nervous system, and which enables our bodies to run smoothly without conscious effort. Because imagine if we had to consciously choose or consciously decide to breathe or how much blood to pump at any given moment. But how does the brain choose what to pay conscious attention to? And that's through something called salience. And the salience of a stimulus, is the state or quality by which it stands out from its neighbors. So saliency typically arises from contrast between items and their neighbors, such as a red dot surrounded by white dots, or a tone telling you that a message has arrived, or a loud noise in a quiet environment. It could be the result of emotional, motivational, or cognitive factors. Did you see how that caught your attention? So when our attention is driven by salient stimuli, it's considered to be bottom-up, memory-free and reactive. It's not a conscious decision. Like the meerkat here. In a group, there's always one meerkat that's on watch duty, waiting for something to catch his attention that could spell danger. But we can also have voluntary attention that's deliberate, such as looking both ways when we cross the street or deciding to tackle a piece of work. So humans and other animals have difficulty paying attention to more than one thing at the same time. So we're constantly faced with the challenge of continually integrating and prioritizing what catches our attention and what we want to deliberately attend to. So the brain is always attending to something, and to live a productive and meaningful life, you need to make sure that you are in charge of what your brain is attending to. And the key to deliberate attention is your prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for executive functions. So your prefrontal cortex inhibits or blocks distractions, switches between tasks, actively maintains and manipulates information, and changes and updates old knowledge. So the brain has many networks, but the three that are important for us here are the default mode network, the central executive network, and the salience network. So the default mode network is active when we're at rest or in our own internal thoughts. The central executive network is active when where we get our work done. And the thing is, we can't be in both networks at the same time. And that's what the word anti-correlation here means. It's one or the other. And what determines which network is active is the salience network. And we just saw that salience can be either reactive or deliberate. So you cannot be attending to your internal thoughts and accomplish a task at the same time. If you work on trying to get yourself motivated or changing your mindset before you start working, you're keeping yourself in the default mode network, and it's impossible to get work accomplished in that network. So you need to get out of the default mode network and into the central executive network. When your mind is focused on your internal thoughts and you need to get work done, the simplest way is to take your mind out of your own thoughts by looking around at the items in the room, or just start working on something small and simple. And in fact, we just saw that it was progress and meaningful work, no matter how small. It could be even tiny, that influenced motivation and led to an upward spiral called the progress loop. So waiting until you feel motivated is counterproductive. It keeps you in the default mode network. And an interesting illustration of another way this research can be used is after I presented this at a conference a couple of years back, one of the attendees came up to me the following day with this story. So the evening after my talk, he went out to a bar alone and was feeling sorry for himself because no one at the conference had invited him to go out for a drink. So he felt alone. And then he remembered my talk on the default mode network and took his mind out of his thoughts and into the room. And he immediately felt better and called a friend. And now he uses the strategy whenever he's stuck in his negative thoughts. So my question is, why don't you try looking around the items in your room right now? And how does that change your internal state? I'd love you to share. I invite you to share in the chat. No, I can't see the chat either. So
Lisa says, I noticed my folder to get my house repaired full on contractor cards. Vicky said, it reminds me of zooming in and out. Patricia says, my breathing became deeper and linger longer.
Yeah.
Stephanie says, I currently have Post-it notes on the wall. It causes me some anxiety, so it's so many things to do. Linda says, too much calls for my attention. I want to get back to this meeting.
Yeah, it can do that, but the whole purpose of this is really to get you into the present moment, because when you're not when you're in your own internal thoughts, you're not in the present moment. So by taking your thoughts out of your mind, right, out of your brain, and looking around at the different items in the room, it takes you into the present moment. Or if this doesn't work for you, then just pick something small to work on, just so it gets you out of your internal thoughts. Yeah? Okay, so let's move on then. So this leads nicely into our next topic on multitasking. So multitasking is trying to do two or more things at the same time, but our brains can't keep two things in mind at the same time. That means the brain can't multitask. Have you ever tried to read something while having a conversation, or listening to a podcast while writing an article? How has that worked for you? I imagine it hasn't worked very well. So much of the research on multitasking has looked at driving while performing another task, such as texting or eating or speaking to passengers in the car or with a friend over a cell phone. And this research shows that the human attentional system has limits for what it can process. Our driving performance is worse while we're engaged in other tasks. Drivers make more mistakes, they brake harder and later, they get into more accidents, they veer into other lanes, and they're less aware of their surroundings. And it's the same thing for other types of multitasking. When we think we're multitasking, we're actually switching tasks quickly. When we try to multitask, the cognitive resources available to both tasks is reduced, and this reduces productivity and increases errors. Psychologists estimate that if you're a chronic multitasker, you may be losing as much as 40% of your day. And I don't know about you, but when my kids can tell when I'm on the phone with them and doing some work at the same time. Both the conversation and the work suffer. Chronic multitasking reduces productivity, can damage relationships, leads to feelings of dissatisfaction and discouragement at the end of the day. And it can have devastating consequences, such as when driving. It doesn't matter whether you use a hands-free or a handheld phone. The issue is that the cognitive resources available to driving are reduced when we're speaking on a phone. And a new study just came out that cell phone distraction leads to more head injuries, both while driving and walking. And the solution is that if you want to get more done in less time, concentrate on one task at a time. So my question, how much time do you waste by trying to multitask? And what if you focused on one thing at a time? So I invite you to share in the chat.
Oh, we do have a question. And Blaine asks, what is the difference between having a conversation on a hands-free phone and having a conversation with someone in the car?
It's a good question, Blaine. So the difference is that the passenger is aware of the road conditions. And if things get difficult, if there's a lot of traffic, things get difficult, they can change their conversation or stop talking. But someone that you're speaking with over the phone won't see that, and they'll just keep talking to you. And so your attention will be distracted from the driving. Yeah.
And some comments we had, oh, they're going fast here. Georgia says, I would accomplish so much more if she didn't multitask. Annie says, I waste attention. I can tell when I am multitasking that I miss content, that I have to go back and listen to what I missed later. Blaine likes the answer to your question. Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens, is that, and we feel really a profound sense of dissatisfaction at the end of the day that we didn't accomplish what we thought we could, right, when we're multitasking.
Vicky says to focus on, sorry. Vicky says, focus on one thing at a time can create flow. And Kat says, I don't like to multitask because I feel it takes way longer to get things done.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thank you. So we'll move on then to our next one, which is willpower. So willpower has traditionally been seen as a depleting resource. Once you used up your store of willpower, it would be difficult for you to exercise self-control, even in unrelated tasks that require willpower. But this view of willpower has come under question recently when a number of studies failed to replicate. So more recent work has found that people who are good at resisting temptation report that they experience fewer temptations. So to put it more simply, the people who said that they excel at willpower are hardly using it at all. And why is that? People who are better at self-control may actually enjoy the activities some of us resist, such as eating healthy, studying, or exercising. They may make activities more enjoyable by adding a fun component to them, such as going to the gym with a friend. And that's one of the reasons I like my Pilates training and have been going religiously for 5 years now. We've become friends. And people who are good at self-control have learned better habits. The really good dieter, for example, wouldn't buy a cupcake or even pass in front of a bakery. And some people just experience fewer temptations, and it may be due to genetics. So I'm the kind of person who can't eat just a few cookies or part of a bag of chips. I need to eat the whole bag, or they'd keep calling to me. So I've organized my life so that I don't keep any cakes or cookies or crackers or chips in the house at all. And if I have wine in the house, I'll drink it, even the red wine. And I don't even like red wine. So I don't keep any in the house. Having to go to the liquor store is a deterrent, even though the store is just around the corner from my house. But that's enough. So I've organized my environment so that I limit the temptations. That's because the environment always wins. And it's the first rule of habit forming. So why make it hard on ourselves when we could just organize our environment to make things easier? But we tend to dismiss things that come easy for us. We only value things that require effort. So my cousin even said that organizing our environment to make life easier was cheating. And a question I often get is, why is it that I can resist a certain food at the store, but not at home? It's because at the store, you only have to make that decision once. At home, you're making that decision constantly, every time you think about it, and eventually you will fail. Of course, some people can keep cookies and chips in the house and not be tempted. And I'm not that person, so I need to organize my environment. And even though we've talked about food here, it's the same for work. Make sure your office is organized for productivity because the environment always wins. My question then for you, what are 1 or 2 small ways that you can change your environment right now? I invite you again to share in the chat. No? Okay, so I'll move on then.
Oh, you know what?
Okay.
They are slow to come.
Yeah.
Maybe because of my internet connection.
Okay, I see Linda says eliminate loose papers. Clean up the office. Yes.
Lisa says clean up papers in my office.
Yeah, recently cleaned off my desk. Yeah, and having everything, and as Vicky said, we're moving reading materials into a schedule for attending. Yes, and making sure that you have everything that you need on your desk so that you can so that you can perform the work that you were intending to perform. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Standing desk, and Blaine says that he's deleted apps off his phone that waste time.
Exactly. Exactly. Those are all good things. Okay, so let's move on to insight. So what happens when we're faced with a problem or an impasse and the solutions that we know don't work? And in fact, what we know may actually get in the way of a new solution. Our brain's electrical activity may inhibit other circuits. In the business world, there's more and more pressure for increased creativity, right? For developing new products, for streamlining delivery systems, for optimizing managerial structure, and dealing with team members and clients. And especially now in these uncertain times, constant innovation is the game. And one form of creativity is insight. It's the sudden solution to a long, vexing problem, a sudden recognition of a new idea, or a sudden understanding of a complex situation. Einstein once described how he achieved his insights by making a great speculative leap to a conclusion and then tracing back the connections to verify the idea. And research has shown that many people's insights involve the sudden emergence of a solution into awareness as a whole, a great speculative leap, or an aha moment. The processes leading to a solution are unconscious and can only be consciously reconstructed after the fact. So in the several seconds before people have an insight or an aha moment, the brain activity slows down. Their attention becomes more diffuse, less focused on the problem. Analytical or step-by-step solvers, on the other hand, remain focused externally on the problem rather than focusing inward to find the solution. At the moment of insight, the brain activity of the insight solver spikes. And Mark Beeman, one of the researchers who studies insight, has seen this so often that he can tell by people's brain activity who will solve the problem analytically in a step-by-step fashion and who will solve the problem using insight. And he calls these people insight machines. And one of the things that can get in the way of a creative solutions is working memory load. When our minds are occupied with to-do lists and other preoccupations, we're less creative. And the larger the working memory load, the less creative we are. When our minds are otherwise occupied, there are fewer brain resources available to be creative. To be creative, our mind needs to be at least relatively clear. And this is why aha moments often happen when we least expect them, in the shower or when we're daydreaming, when our minds aren't focused on anything in particular. The constant need to produce can sabotage our creativity. So insight can't be forced, but there are things you can do to encourage it. So to increase your insight potential, you can engage in activities that encourage an open mind. You can gather a wide base of knowledge and then ask how you could do this differently. You can engage in a new hobby that uses completely different skills. You can relax and let your mind wander, or sleep on the problem, meditate, or step away from it and concentrate on something else. And it's important to cultivate an uncluttered mind. Insight can't happen with a cluttered mind. And then you should evaluate the solution you reach through insight, because not all solutions will be accurate. So my question, how can you add some downtime into your schedule? How are you using the downtime that you have? And are you allowing your mind to wander from time to time? So I invite you to share in the chat.
Kat says, I'd like to meditate.
Yes.
Linda
Good on you.
says, lots of laundry leads to more insight. Sandy says, insight comes from riding my bicycle. Vicky says, build space into your calendar. Lisa says, I often go on walks or bicycle joy rides with no destination. Annie says, I could get back to my coloring, my writing. I've been able to do daily meditation. Blaine says, I intentionally schedule multiple hour-long blocks of deep work time where I work on just one intensive value-producing work.
All great ideas. Thank you.
And
Yeah.
Lisa says, I sing whenever song pops into my head and listen to the words.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. All right. So thanks for sharing. And we can move on now to resilience. So we keep being told that stress is bad and that we should focus on reducing stress, but it's often not possible to avoid stressors, especially now. And instead, avoiding or minimizing stress can lead to missed opportunities for developing resilience. So stress isn't wholly negative or something to be avoided at all costs. Stress can facilitate performance, it can promote active coping, it can protect against the damaging effects of catabolic hormones. But people tend to equate stress with distress. So for example, when people were asked to choose the best advice for giving a speech, 91% of people said that remaining calm and relaxed, or in other words, trying to reduce or eliminate stress was the best option. And people believe that efforts to cope with stress should focus on eliminating stress rather than on seeking to optimize stress responses. In other words, that stress is a problem to be solved rather than an opportunity to be harnessed. So bad things happen as they are now. And in fact, most people experience serious negative events at some point in their lives. But contrary to what you might think, research shows that compared to experiencing either no adversity or high adversity, experiencing some adversity builds resilience, meaning that it may help us manage well in the face of future potentially stressful situations. So resilience is a U-shaped function. So what this means is that compared to experiencing either no adversity or high adversity, experiencing some adversity builds resilience. It helps you manage well in the face of future potentially stressful situations. So the research shows that a history of high adversity or no adversity predicted greater global distress, greater functional impairment, which is the extent to which physical and emotional health interfered with social and work activities, greater PTS symptoms than a history of some adversity at the bottom of the U here. And a history of some adversity was related to greater life satisfaction than no adversity or high adversity. So changing our beliefs about stress can help us cope better with adversity and can even prolong our life. And some new research suggests that some stress at a young age could lead to a longer life because it makes you better able to manage the stress you might encounter later in life. So my question for you, so what other more descriptive words could you use to describe a stressful situation? Could you use words such as frustrated, disappointed, confused, sad, for example? And how does that change your experience of what's happening now? Challenging is a good word. Excited, perplexed. Do you see how, and temporary, do you see how those words feel different, right? Because stress is pervasive and permanent, right? Whereas those other words are temporary. Yeah, extraordinary. Yeah, exactly. So we have to be careful about the words that we're using and not paint every difficulty with, with the big brush of stress.
Irena, Lisa had a question. How do we know whether our level of stress is optimal?
That's that's very personal, right? So I can't really answer that right now. Right? Because there are always things you can do. I mean, you can always change your beliefs about stress. I mean, there's so much research about stress and about the benefits of changing our beliefs about stress. So if we've suffered a lot of adversity, but believe that if we suffered a lot of adversity, negative life events, but we believe that they don't damage our health, then that can increase our longevity. So a lot of it has to do with belief about stress, and unfortunately, in our culture, stress is bad. You know, stress. We've learned that all stress is bad. Yeah. All right. So let's move on then to uncertainty. So do you worry about catching the virus? So about an elderly parent becoming ill, about sending your kids to school, or even just going to the store? So I first want to say that this is completely normal, but excessive worry and fear hijack our brain. They interfere with the ability of our prefrontal cortex to make rational decisions and thoughtful plans, which we need right now. We need to calm our minds so we can deal with what's going on in a thoughtful manner and save our mental health. Labeling and reframing are two quick ways to reduce the immediate emotional charge so you can then act in a more thoughtful way. So Matthew Lieberman and his colleagues asked participants to look at photographs of negative, emotionally evocative scenes, such as looking at a snake, and then to reframe the photo to decrease the emotional response that came up for them. So for example, they could reframe the photo of snakes as it's just a photo, it's not real, or there are no snakes where I live, and so on. And another group was just asked to label, right, or name the emotion that came up for them. And a third group just passively observed the photographs. So when the participants labeled their feelings about the photos, right, when they just named their feelings about the photos, their unpleasantness ratings decreased compared to simply observing the photos. And you can see that here. And their unpleasantness ratings were even lower when they reappraised or reframed their emotional response to the photos. So labeling and reframing both work to reduce the emotional salience of a stimulus. And reframing and labeling also reduce the activation in the amygdala. You can see the amygdala on the left here in red. And in the panel on the right, you can see that the reappraisal and labeling conditions produce significantly less activation in the amygdala than simply observing the photos. The amygdala processes emotions, especially fear, so reducing its activity is a good thing. And when you habitually accept your mental experiences, you experience fewer negative emotions. And the fewer negative emotions you have, the better your psychological health. And in addition, habitually accepting your mental experiences contributes to psychological health on its own. Interestingly, habitually accepting our mental experiences didn't increase positive emotions, and positive emotion on its own didn't contribute to psychological health. It was really the reduction in negative emotion because of our acceptance of them that had the biggest effect on psychological health. So my question for you is, labeling a problematic emotion is the biggest way to reduce salience, or the quickest way to reduce its salience. So what emotion or feeling can you label? And do you feel that it's calmed down your nervous system? I invite you again to share in the chat. Worry as opportunity, yes. And sometimes all we have to do is just label that as worry, right? And it should feel, and labeling is a form of acceptance, or naming an emotion is a form of acceptance. So you should start to feel a calming down of your nervous system when you do that. Yeah. Any more, or should I move on? Fear can involve controls. What do you mean by that? Impatience equals awareness.
Like if we're having a fear of the example you used, catching the coronavirus, the controls we can implement are to socially distance, utilize a mask, wash our hands frequently, those kinds of things. So the things that you fear, by, I don't know if that's labeling or reframing, maybe reframing or both, there's controls that you can implement about those.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And it's also important to understand that we like to accept that we have a fear of it, and then do what we need to do, right? Like you said, controls. Yeah. All right. So let's move on. So the most basic thing you can do to maintain your motivation is to keep your body budget in good shape through a healthy diet, exercise. Oh, sorry. So let's now look at how important our physiological well-being is to performance. The purpose of the brain is to ensure that we grow, survive, and reproduce. And this is called allostasis, or the body budget. And allostasis is a process for how the brain regulates the body according to costs and benefits. So whatever your brain is doing, thinking, feeling, perceiving, emoting, it's also regulating your autonomic nervous system, your immune system, and your endocrine system. And to be efficient, our mind-body requires the ability to anticipate the body's needs and satisfy them before they arise. So interoceptive sensations, and those are just the sense of our internal state of our body, are usually experienced as lower dimensional feelings of affect or mood. So affect or mood is a general sense of feeling that you experience throughout your day. It's not an emotion, but a much simpler feeling with two features, valence and arousal. And so in the diagram here, you can see how these two features interact with each other to produce your affect or mood. You can have an unpleasant valence with high arousal and be upset or distressed. You can have an unpleasant valence with low arousal and be lethargic or depressed. You can have pleasant valence with high arousal and be elated or thrilled. Or you can have pleasant valence with low arousal and feel serene or calm. In fact, your affect or mood is simply a summary of your body budget. A bad feeling doesn't always mean that something is wrong. It just means that you're taxing your body budget. So when your body budget is unbalanced, your affect or mood prompts your brain to search for explanations using past experience to predict what will impact your body budget and change your affect. And the most basic thing you can do to maintain your motivation is to keep your body budget in good shape through a healthy diet, exercise, and optimal sleep. Sometimes a lack of motivation may really be due to an unbalanced body budget. So after several hours work, I often start feeling overwhelmed. And for me, it's accompanied by the usual shallow breath and the tight chest and the elevated shoulders and a knot in my stomach. And I used to define it as anxiety and tried coaching myself out of it, which didn't work. And I had to stop working for the day. That is until I learned about the body budget. And when I took a deeper look at my bodily sensations when I was feeling the anxiety overwhelm, I realized that it was always accompanied by a sense of fatigue. And I had only been getting about 6 hours of sleep a night, and there are cognitive and psychological consequences to only 6 hours of sleep. So I'm committed now to getting my 8 hours of sleep a night. And if I need to, I take an afternoon nap. And because the ideal nap time is 10 minutes, to wake up feeling refreshed, I set my sleep app for 45 minutes, which gives me time to fall asleep. And it's been a miracle because after my nap, I'm re-energized and ready to put in the rest of my workday. So this is an example of how it was, my body budget was taxed, and just sleep resolved that. And research has shown too that lack of sleep affects our vigilance, makes us angrier, and even affects our ability to follow a series of actions like driving a car or performing medical procedures. Yeah. And it's not just sleep. There's also a lot of research on the importance of diet on cognitive functioning and psychological well-being. So I had a high-functioning client who was a portfolio manager whose self-esteem was through the floor. And for the first 6 weeks of our time together, there was no progress. But she had also been eating a lot of junk food, and I kept encouraging her to clean up her diet. And finally, after 6 weeks, she gave up the junk food, called me a couple of days later, and was amazed that her brain fog had gone away. Her self-esteem went up, and we were able to do some good work together. But of course, every time she kept going back to the junk food, her self-esteem and motivation would fall. And we did have to do work on why she was self-medicating with junk food. And here's another example of how our physiology affects our psychology. I don't know if you've heard of the expression hangry, right? Being hangry is when you're feeling more irritated, annoyed, or negative when hungry. Most people don't even realize that it may be hunger, and eating something usually resolves it. And my daughter is one of those people who gets hangry, but she recognizes it for what it is, and she'll even say, I'm getting hangry. And eating something always resolves that for her. So my question for you is that, looking back over today or yesterday, how well did you eat, exercise, and sleep? And how was your mood, your focus, and your energy? And can you see a relationship between the two? And I invite you to share it again in the chat.
Linda says HALT stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Linda. So any other shares?
Lisa says sleep, okay, food, healthy, a little tired, okay, mood. Amber says, I'm definitely a better mom before 9 p.m.
Yeah.
Vicky says, yes, my husband knows when I am hangry and feeds me. Haha. Blaine says, it's definitely been more difficult to get in good exercise during this pandemic.
Yeah.
Annie says, sleep so-so, exercise good. Me too, Amber.
Yeah. Yeah, and there was a very recent research that showed that somehow among men see themselves as more masculine if they're restricting their sleep. So that is a problem, because I've heard that there are a lot of executives, there are a lot of leaders who are trying to restrict their sleep to become more productive, and it's counterproductive. Okay, and it's a weird way of looking at masculinity. All right. So let's move on to visualization then. So one of the ways we're told to motivate ourselves is to visualize having successfully achieved our goal. Visualization makes events seem real, but in fact, visualizing success is only wishful thinking. When we visualize success, we substitute the fantasy of success for progress toward the goal. Athletes use visualization successfully, but they don't just visualize themselves on the podium. They visualize the process of getting to their goal. So the famous golfer Jack Nicklaus, for example, before every shot did the following visualization. Right? Before every shot, I go to the movies inside my head, and here's what I see. First, I see the ball where I want it to finish, nice and white and sitting up high on the bright green grass. Then I see the ball going there, its path and trajectory, and even its behavior on landing. The next scene shows me making the kind of swing that will turn the previous image into reality. And these home movies are a key to my concentration and to my positive approach to every shot. Jack Nicklaus visualized the stroke he had to make to land the ball where he wanted it. And it's similar for other athletes. And many athletes say that they can even feel the muscle twinges associated with their actions. So studies show that visualizing a successful outcome can actually be worse than not visualizing at all. That's because it's just fantasy, and fantasy leads to a drop in energy, so that there's not enough energy to work toward realizing the fantasy. So Gabrielle Ottingen, who does a lot of work in this area, asked students to write about how everything in the coming week would go really well versus just writing down thoughts and daydreams about the coming week. And she found that the students who fantasized accomplished less in that week than those who had not fantasized. And the students who fantasized reported lower feelings of energization than the students who didn't fantasize. And then she measured energization using systolic blood pressure and found that the systolic blood pressure of the students in the daydreaming condition dropped significantly. But the systolic blood pressure of those who wrote in detail about the coming week didn't change. And at baseline, the blood pressure of both groups was the same. So this was an objective measure of a reduction in energy following fantasy. And in a further study, she also found that for those students for whom academic achievement was important, the systolic blood pressure of those who fantasized about achieving an A dropped. So why do we continue to fantasize? Because it makes us feel good by celebrating our success before we achieve it. So what's the correct way to visualize then? Create an expectation of success by mapping out your steps and obstacles, and visualize the steps you need to take to achieve your goal. So my question for you is, has this changed how you look at visualization, and how will you visualize in the future? And again, I ask you to share, I invite you to share in the chat. So I see Nancy said we should not equate fantasization with visualization. Visualizing just a successful outcome, like standing on the podium of success without visualizing the steps, is fantasy. Yeah. Lisa wrote that she approaches goals like a program manager. Yay to Lisa.
I don't agree that fantasy visualization has to be fantasization. I mean, if you're visualizing with concrete steps toward what you say a meaningful action or meaningful goal, then that doesn't have to be fantasy. Fantasy, to me, presumes that it can never be real. But if something is really working for an individual client, that, how can you argue with that? So it's hard to generalize. I think we should not judge and generalize.
Well, Nancy, what you were just describing to me is actually the kind of visualization that I've been talking about, is visualizing the steps, right? The steps, and then planning for the obstacles to get you to your goal. And that's not fantasy. Fantasy is when you're just, so let's say for a runner, rather than visualizing the steps it takes to win the race, just visualizing standing on the podium with nothing before that. That is fantasy.
Yeah, so I think you and I were not disagreeing.
No, we don't. No, we don't disagree. No,
Okay.
no, you described exactly what Gabrielle Ottingen has found in her research, right? Plan,
Okay.
visualize, yeah, plan the step, plan for obstacles, and visualize the steps if you want to visualize. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Okay, I'm glad we resolved that. Yeah, so it's really important to, so Vicky, visualize the success at incremental steps from the end point. Now, yes, you can work backwards and then allow the future and the present moment to emerge creatively. Yes, you have to fill, and Lisa, yeah, you have to fill in the steps. Risk, resources, and schedule, exactly. So Blaine asked a question, isn't it true that the more sensory rich we visualize, is that us actually doing something is even more powerful? If all we're doing is visualizing having achieved a goal, right? So having earned that $1 million that we had wanted to earn, or standing or standing on the podium, right? Winning the gold medal. It doesn't matter how rich it is. It's still fantasy.
No, what I'm referring to is I'm concurring and agreeing with you,
Okay.
but adding the fact that from what I've learned in the past about this whole concept called what I've called visioneering is that it's one thing to just have a mental image of us taking the steps, but like the golfer example you provided, if he adds more senses to that visioneering experience, meaning I can hear the wind, I see the colors, I can feel almost the club in my hand, I can hear the sound when it hits the ball. So the more senses we add to that visioneering experience, the more real it becomes. And I'm curious to know from your research, does it, I've always heard this, but I don't know whether that's proven out in actual science. And that is the more sensory rich we make it, that experience, is it true that then our brain has a very difficult time knowing the difference of reality and something we actually did and something that we envision with a very sensory rich kind of experience? Can it tell the difference?
No, it can't really tell the difference. That's why, yeah, that's why running through different scenarios, right, in our imagination can work. Right?
So that's why I'm thinking by
yeah.
adding all the senses, the more senses we add to that, even more so the brain can't tell the difference between
And
those
it-
two.
and
So
more
that if we go to do something in the future, if it's something that we really haven't done a lot yet, but we've envisioned ourselves actually going through the steps in the way that we want to over and over and over and again in our mind, and we've added all those sensory things to it, it's more likely that we're going to do that in the future.
Well, yeah, because you've created you've created a richer example, right? So you have more hooks on which to hook progress on, and and the way athletes visualize too is they can even feel the muscle twinges, right? So it's not just a mental exercise, right? They're using their whole bodies in it in a way, without actually doing the running when they're visualizing. Yeah. Good points. All right, so let's move on to another favorite topic of self-esteem. So have you ever tried using positive affirmations to increase your self-esteem? The thing is, they don't work for the people they were designed for, the people like many of us who need help with self-esteem. So if you're telling yourself that you're lovable or successful, or whatever it is that you want to be hasn't worked, it's not your fault, because positive affirmations can actually make you feel worse. And it can be a double whammy. So in addition to not working, you beat yourself up over the fact that it doesn't work for you when it works for everyone else. And it will never work if your brain doesn't believe it. But here's the way that you can use affirmations that will work. And it's by completing this statement. This went well today because I am, and you complete that. So why this works is because the first part of the statement is proof for the second part. So your brain won't reject it. It'll believe it. So my talk went well today because I'm a good speaker. I don't think of myself as a good speaker, but now I have proof that I am, and my mind accepts it. And I had a client with low self-esteem, and it was that junk food eater. I had her choose 3 things at the end of every day that went well that day, and to complete the statement for each of those items. And her self-esteem went up within a few days. And the thing is, to complete the I am part as something that you are rather than something that you can do. You want to change how you think about who you are. Yeah, so I open it up to you now to fill in the blanks. Right, so this went well today because I am. And how does it change your energy? And I invite you to share it in the chat.
Pamela says positive. Lisa says persistent, organized.
Good on you. Yeah.
Annie says, my client sessions went well today because I am a good coach.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have proof, right? You're not just saying these baseless affirmations. Oh, I am a good coach. You have proof that you are. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So we have a bonus strategy, and that's on neuroplasticity. So as coaches, we're in the business of changing brains because all behavior change is brain change. So why am I showing you a street map of London? So in order to qualify as a licensed London taxi driver, a trainee driver has to learn the complex and irregular layout of London's about 25,000 streets within a specific area and the locations of thousands of places of interest. And this learning is known as the knowledge, and it usually takes between 3 and 4 years to learn it. Then there are stringent exams that have to be passed to obtain a license. And these training and qualification procedures are unique among taxi drivers anywhere in the world. And research done with the London taxi drivers has found that those who had passed the knowledge test successfully after working on the knowledge for 3 or 4 years had increased the gray matter volume in the hippocampus. Those who didn't complete the knowledge didn't show an increase in the hippocampus. So here's where the hippocampus is located. And the hippocampus acts as a storage unit, a storage site, not a storage unit, a storage site for the spatial information acquired during the knowledge. So what can the London taxi drivers teach us about neuroplasticity? There needs to be a goal. The London taxi drivers had a goal, which was to pass the knowledge test. The learning needs to be effortful. The learning did not happen by accident. The participants put in a great deal of effort to learn the knowledge, and it needs to be repeated over time. So again, the brain changes occurred after the participants trained over a period of time. For the London taxi drivers, it was over 3 years or more, and the amount of time depends on the difficulty of the domain. So learning the knowledge, for example, is infinitely more difficult than learning how to juggle, for example. So in sum, the London taxi drivers show us that there is capacity for memory to be improved and related structural changes to occur in the brain well into adulthood. And these results offer encouragement for lifelong learning. So my question for you, what new skill would you like to learn and how could you structure it? And I invite you again to share in the chat. I want to learn to play the piano at some point. Yeah, financial acumen. Yeah.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on that? I'm curious to know. So are you saying that that part of the brain matter actually enlarges?
Yeah, it actually enlarged.
So the process of having a goal and obtaining and doing the work to obtain knowledge, and this was spatial knowledge, or in this particular case, but it can be just general knowledge. So the more time we spent in obtaining knowledge, it does actually cause an increased growth or enlargement in that brain.
It's not only, I mean, it's called the knowledge, right? But I mean, it's not just general knowledge. They had to learn how to navigate all of these streets. If you look at some of the videos on them, they have to, their exams are like, okay, get from point A to point B, and they have to recite how they're going to get there. And if you remember the video, the map, right? London streets are not square, right? They're all over the place. So yes, this was spatial, and it increased, increased gray matter volume in the hippocampus. But you know, not everything is going to increase gray matter in hippocampus, right? Depending on what you're learning, it could be gray matter in other areas. It could be different brain connections, right? So the difference, I mean, the opportunities are really wide. And it's not just acquiring knowledge. It's is if you want to change a habit, yeah, and even acquiring knowledge. If you want to change a habit also.
Developing
Right?
a skill.
Developing a skill, yeah, it needs to be repeated over time. There needs to be a goal. You have to put in the effort, and it needs to be repeated over time. And an important thing to remember is that everything we do has the potential for changing our brain wiring. And so that's why we need to be mindful of what we do habitually. Yeah. So Lisa wrote, goal plus effort plus repetition is a plus for our clients. Yeah, so even emotional intelligence, if you're helping them with emotional intelligence and trying to, and get them to react differently, it's the same thing. There's a goal, there has to be effort in doing it, and there has to be repetition over time. So it applies to any kind of skill that you want to learn, or any kind of behavior that you want to change. It's the same thing. Yeah. Linda wrote knit. Yeah. So yeah, so this is it for my presentation, actually. And this is how you can get in touch with me. And if you go there too, I have a 10 strategies ebook that you can download. And the strategies aren't exactly the same as the ones I've offered here. There are some differences. So if you get the ebook, then you'll have even more strategies. So I open the floor now to questions you might have on, yeah.